So today we're going to finish our discussion. We're talking now about the spiritual dimension of all the things we've been learning about the last, at least one thing, the last 6 weeks or so. Okay, so we're in the text. Okay, Yossi, there's one, yeah, okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so we were explaining the spiritual significance of all this. So just to remind you again of the essential, very novel ruling. It comes down to a very practical ruling because when Mashiach comes, there's going to be an immediate question. This will be immediately relevant. Righteous converts, may they participate in the sacrificial food? May they bring a korban? May they bring a korban, partake of a korban of an offering, and the like. And the answer, according to the Rebbe's novel ruling, is yes, notwithstanding the fact that he or she has to bring their ger korban. But their ger korban is an obligation they have that they must bring. But it doesn't prevent them from participating in and partaking of korbanos, notwithstanding the fact that when the Beis Hamikdash stood, that would not be the case. The Beis Hamikdash stood, so if a ger goes to the two, but not three, milah, tvila, but not korban, so then the person, and we were examining the Rambam's words very, very analytically, which I'm not going to repeat them because it all lies in the turn and nuance of language. This entire huge revolutionary insight is all based on tensions in the language, essentially, it's not so much based on it, but reflected in the tensions of the language of the Rambam, which we critically examined over the last 4 or 6 weeks. So notwithstanding the fact that at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the ger does not bring his korban, he may not eat of kodshim, of sanctified food, till he brings his or her korban. And the language of the Rambam was that he has not become, till he brings his or her korban, kechol kshore Yisrael, all kosher Jews, literally. So this was a very big problem that we're trying to justify. This was the whole tension here, the whole question. How is it possible at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, if he doesn't bring his korban, he's not a kosher Jew? And now there's no Beis Hamikdash, he is 100%, but you were missing a third component. This was the whole question. As we said, repeated, every time we discussed this, we would have thought an objective, simple understanding of these laws would have led to the conclusion that there cannot be conversion nowadays. That's the beginning and end of story. In the same way that there cannot be many laws nowadays because there's no Beis Hamikdash. In fact, most of the halachas most of the mitzvahs of the Torah, the vast majority of the mitzvahs of the Torah, we cannot observe nowadays. They do not apply. They're not applicable because there's no Beis Hamikdash. Hundreds of halachas, hundreds of mitzvahs, revolving around the critical role of the Beis Hamikdash and korbanos. So this will be another one. So there's no converts. You wait till Mashiach comes. I'm not saving anybody's soul, as we've explained at length in one of our talks. We don't encourage conversion, so there won't be conversion. Many would argue it would be being a lot better off, especially nowadays, with the Mickey Mouse conversions being done by so many for a fee, and it's a joke, a joke. So many would argue we'd be a lot better off without conversions throughout the exile period. The fact is that there is, and some of our greatest leaders and members of the Jewish people have been converts, like Rav Hager, that we talked about, that Rambam writes a letter to. We brought a proof from there without repeating all of that again. And many other great converts. And they're 100%. So the whole tension of the sikh is, how is it possible? They're missing the korban. So the Rebbe's profound insight here is that the three components are not equal. And it's all, again, in the tension, in the language, and the nuance of the Rambam can be seen. 2 out of the 3 bring the person into conversion. The third thing, the korban, simply removes the barrier. The barrier to what? To bring in korbanos. That's what it is. Then the korban doesn't enter the person into the covenant. That's milah and tefillah. So why the korban? The Beis Hamikdash stood in order to bring korbanos. He had to remove the barrier that prevents you from participating in kodshim by bringing your korban. An example we gave is a lock. How do you enter? You don't enter a house with a key. You enter with your feet, or you're carried in, whatever it is. You have a key from today till tomorrow, and you don't walk into the house, walk through the door. It's meaningless. The key is if the door is locked. If the door is locked, you need the key. And what if the door is not locked? And what if there's no door? If there's no door, so there's no need for any key whatsoever. So that's what the Rebbe is explaining, and it's all in the language. That's the whole beauty is for the scholar. It's all in, that's why the Rambam says it this way, and that's why he says it that way. That's why he changes the language, and we resolve. It's all very nuanced, and I hope we remember at least an element of it. He doesn't say 3 things bring a person in. He speaks about, for example, how do we know all the laws of conversion? So what happened at Sinai? So it doesn't say with 3 things brought the Jews into the covenant. He says there were 3 things they entered, leaving open the interpretation. 2 of them walk, and the third removes the barrier. It's not the 3 things bring you in. No, you can go in without the korban if there's no Beis Hamikdash. That's what he's implying. Just saying in practicality, they entered with 3 things, but not 3 things bring you in. There's a huge difference. Because 2 of those things are walking, and the third is the barrier. There are other nuances as well, and in the Rambam's language, it's not a simple, obvious insight that Rebbe is saying. It's a revolutionary insight. It will have practical ramifications. Mashiach comes today, as I told you. You guys are going to, hey, wait, it's okay. If you're a righteous convert, but only Mashiach, God, will judge who is and who's not. A righteous convert, you can bring right away, Beis Hamikdash, bring a Thanksgiving offering, whatever it is that you'd like to do. No barrier. You'll bring your korban. You have to, you got an obligation to bring your korban. But that doesn't diminish in any way or compromise your 100% Jewishness, this huge revolution. Now, we're going to think about this a little bit further. I'm learning this with my son, Lisa David. So he's saying, so let's understand this. Let's go back to the time of the Beis Hamikdash, because the language there is. So this is the question. So the time of the Beis Hamikdash, here's the question. The time of the Beis Hamikdash, if the person didn't bring his korban, could he count him in the minyan? He's 100%. It comes out from the Rebbe. He's 100% Jewish then. That's beautiful. Even then, 100% Jewish. Only thing is that then he couldn't participate in kodshim. Now the chiddush is that if he converts now, he can participate right away. Right? That's the big chiddush. He has an obligation, but doesn't to bring his korban. So just to understand this. So again, so nowadays there's no Beis Hamikdash, but if there would be, to be able to eat kodshim, you have to bring a korban. So we still have to understand a little bit. Okay, so there isn't today, but still, it's a key you need to eat kodshim. Beis Hamikdash comes, that door is locked. You got to unlock it with a key. We say no, the door's locked, the door's wide open. Why? A little bit still. So it appears the explanation is like this. Time of the Beis Hamikdash, a convert is told this, if we have this conversation, we'd say something like this. What's going to make you Jewish is Mila Tefillah. But you should know, here's the thing. I think this is an important insight. At the same time that you're becoming Jewish, you have an obligation right now. To eat korbanos, you have to bring your korban. Now it's true. Bringing your korban is a key that allows you to enter into this room called the Beis Hamikdash and bring korbanos. But that obligation devolves upon the person right then and there as they become Jewish. So till he doesn't bring his korban, he can't participate in korbanos, even though in essence could count him in the minyan, he's still Jewish. However, why does that change the time of Golus? The time of Golus, when he became Jewish, it's Mila Tefillah. There was nothing there, no obligation. There's no obligation that came together when he became Jewish. So his becoming Jewish did not obligate. Here's the point. The time of Golus, he's becoming Jewish, not obligated to bring this korban because there's no Beis Hamikdash. So it can't be an obligation. In other words, when he becomes Jewish, the whole key is moot. What key? Key for what? It's not the Beis Hamikdash. He's not given any key. He's not given any key. Take this and open the door to courtship. Because there's no Beis Hamikdash. So since at the time when he had it, that key did not exist because there's no Beis Hamikdash, so that, in the words of the halacha, there was no lion crouching on the object, remember? Remember? That's the whole point is this. The object is there, but just the line, you can't access it. There's no line, there's no object. So therefore, the Jewishness now is 100%. And then when the Beis Hamikdash is built, now boom, a new thing, you got to bring a korban. Because it's new, and therefore additional, he doesn't diminish him, doesn't prevent him from bringing other korbanos. Time of the Beis Hamikdash, since it all came together at one time, the key and the entry, therefore you can't bring korbanos till you bring this one. But if you become Jewish, Bismana Golos, the time of Golos, that key wasn't given to him at the time he became Jewish because there's no Beis Hamikdash. So what? 100% Jewish. Beis Hamikdash is built. Bring any korban you wish. You also have an obligation to bring your korban as a ger. You follow? Because the time he became a ger, part of that process, even if it's just removing the lion, did not exist. It comes afterwards, not at the same time. So since it comes afterwards, my Jewishness is established as a fact. I can participate in korbanos, and I have an obligation to bring a korban. Okay, that's the end of now of the halachic dimension of it. And now we started already last week the spiritual dimension. So I'll just remind you where we're up to.
I can't just say with the Rabbanim, you have to daven. That's with the Rabbanim, you have to daven because it's connected to Rabbanim. Just like now, I can go.
Oh, so you're adding something. You're saying it, and he's talking davening. He has the korbanos. That's a good point, actually. You're strengthening it. You're strengthening it. You're strengthening it.
Because your way is that there is no need for it because there is no Beis Hamikdash. So there's no free things to be Jewish. Times of the Beis Hamikdash, you had that. Now it's not strengthening it. It's the other way around. We're getting the way out.
It is strengthening it because the Ger's obligation to daven, which is connected to korbanos, is exactly the same as everybody else. So we see that. So what do we see? You're adding into dimension that in Zman Golos becoming a Ger with relation to korbanos is exactly the same as the Jews. It's not going to get less after Mashiach comes.
But he would have to.
It's not going to get less. He has to bring his korban. It's not going to diminish him. He had a connection to korbanos, whatever that means, the same as everybody else now. So because Mashiach came, no one can take it away from you. When Mashiach comes, it gets more, not less. So you're adding to the insight. Okay, it's a good point. With Chiddush. All right. So now we're spending all this spiritually. So let's bring you up to speed. We're up to in the text. To explain spiritually why the three things are not equal. The first two bring the ger into Mila and Tvila bring the ger. into the bris, into the covenant, and the korban simply removes the line that prevents him from participating in kodshim, in sanctified food. Why they're not on equal footing? Why aren't all three equal critical components? So aside from seeing it in the language of the Rambam that they're different, they're two categories. Now we understand. We want to understand why they're different. You follow? That's what's coming now. It's a beautiful explanation, which will lead in the end to, as I said at the very outset, when we started learning all this, every day it applies to us. As we'll see at the end of our talk, at the end of the Sikha, every day, I'm going to tell you right now, it's a gewaldige question. I'm sure you all said this morning's blessings, right? Everybody said them. So every morning we all said, Shalei Asani Goy. We thank God for not making me a non-Jew. That would seem to be a blessing in vain. You're born Jewish, you're born Jewish. It can't change. Nothing in the world can change it. So what's the bracha that you didn't make me Shalei Asani Goy? Now you might ask the same question, Shalei Asani Isha. But then you can say you can make enough for operation. But halachically, an operation in the world is going to change anything. Because your chromosomes, etc., the operation is cosmetic. And they pump drugs into you and whatever, and the man, whatever, starts to exhibit female attributes. But he's still scientifically not a male. So you can ask the same question on that, whatever. It is a good question, Shalei Asani Isha. You're male, you can't change that. That's why I'm making you bracha for it. Say it once in your life, if ever, and that's it. So that needs an answer too. That needs a separate answer. But we're asking now on the question, making a bracha Shalei Asani Goy. It's a blessing in vain.
Could you say Shalei Asani transgender?
Again, there's no such thing. You're born, however you're born, that's how you are for life. There's no such thing. There's no such thing in essence. Psychologically, it's one thing. But in essence, one is male or female, and that's the end of the story. Now, since you bring up the question, I will just point out to you there's a very important caveat or context, and that is that we are all actually all male and female. Every human being is man and woman, male and female, and not only that, every human being is an animal. And not only that, every human being is every animal. And not only that, every human being is the star on the sun and all the stars in the cosmos. I could keep on adding to the list. What I'm saying is that every human being is a microcosm of the universe. We are olam katan, the words of our sages, a micro universe. Everybody is male and female. That's a fact. So the difference between male and female is just the dominating chromosome, and that nobody can change. So in that sense, whatever you're born, you are for life. Now but that also means, having heard what you just heard, that everybody is both male and female. So there is an attraction to one degree or another to the same gender, latently. Just a question of dominance. Some people it's very dominant, some people it's very subtle. Look what happens in prisons. Avowed so-called heterosexuals. Again, in Judaism, there's no such thing as a heterosexual, or as a bisexual, or as a homosexual. We're all multisexual, beginning and end of story. But at the same time, the dominant the chromosome defines halachically male or female. And that cannot be changed. Nothing in the world can change that. It's impossible. But at the same time, since we're multisexual, as I said, what happens in prisons, macho guys engage in homosexual activity. Has this happened? All of a sudden became gay? Didn't become gay. There's no other outlet, so there's this outlet. And if there's no people, there's animals. If you know what happens on farms in America or anywhere in the world. Animals. How's it possible? Because there's the animal and the human beings. It's possible. It's all possible. Everything is possible. I've told you it's worth repeating. I don't know, Dave, if you heard this, I'll say it for you. It's beautiful, very, very, crystallizes this teaching very well and very, very beautifully. Rabbi Dr. Avram Twersky passed away recently, not a few years ago, 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago.
A little more than a year.
A little more than a year ago, so Rabbi Twersky from, not from Milwaukee, he was in Boston. Author of, I don't know, countless books, and a wonderful chassid and author, psychiatrist, psychologist, doctor. We have a lot of his books in the library, and they're all gems. By the way, there's a book that I recommend if you can get it. I think it's out of print. I recommend this book. Write this down. From Generation to Generation, and it's reflections about his upbringing. And there's so much there in terms of what parents need to know. It's so beautiful. Just the story of how he was brought up. His father is a sign of both Chabad and Chernobyl, the dynasty. So I used to give it out in the early days. When I first went on Shlichus, we went a lot of books. Today, there's a plethora of books exploding every day, but not a lot of books to give out to people that were starting on the journey. This is one of the books I give out, Generation to Generation. So what am I telling you? So he says like this, he related once, he may have written it up, when he became a psychologist, so you have to undergo psychoanalysis to become a psychologist. So he went to his professor, he says, I can make this very simple. Like the deep, dark desires and secrets that I harbor, you want to know what they are? He says, read this list. He says, read this list. It's a photocopy of the prohibitions in Parshas Achrei Moishe, which you read, by the way, every in Piprit Mincha, bestiality and homosexuality and incest and all the prohibitions. Obviously, adultery and everything else. So the rabbi gives it to the professor, says, that's what I could do. That's me. So the professor says, aghast, Rabbi, you? He says, yeah, obviously. The Torah says don't, it means I could. And the Torah says don't. The Torah prohibits it, it means it's human being can do these things. The Torah says don't kill, because people could kill. They had that propensity to kill, propensity to steal, to lie, perjure. It's no different. It's the same Torah, same list. Don't. If it's you can't help it, the Torah wouldn't say you can't do it. The prohibition means it is a choice to some degree. So this is a very, very important teaching. I hope you remember it. We're all multi-sexual. You can do everything. And by the way, this is also very helpful. It doesn't help for everybody. Some people, again, even though they're born male or female, but the other propensity, the other dimensions of the multi-sexual character of the human being is very dominant and a very strong attraction to the same gender and very powerful. And why this would happen, only God knows, has to do with reincarnation. It's a whole. It's very sad. It's very sad and very it means a person's like doomed to be born on a desert island. If you're on a desert island, what happens? Who can you marry? Nobody. Why would God do that? I'm shipwrecked. It has to do with the mystical things you don't know. We have to be compassionate, and it's not. We don't judge anybody, as you will well know. Chabad. But what I'm telling you is, if someone's not very hardwired, because again, everybody has this propensity. Everybody. We're all multi-sexual. Finished. You have to know this. We're a microcosm of the entire universe. You're also an elephant and you're an ant. You're everything. You're a ferocious tiger and you're a butterfly. Everything is in the human condition. So what am I saying? It's helpful to know this. I don't want to be too graphic here, but if a person understands, he looks at himself or herself and looks at another person and doesn't just see man, woman, but you understand that each person is a microcosm of the world. So I'll put it to you this way. In marriage and husband-wife relationship, it's not simply a male gets together with a female and gets together. It's much more nuanced and multi-layered than that. They're connecting to each other in a fully realized relationship, not just male and female. The male to the male, the female to the female, to the son to the daughter, the mother to the child. It's all there. Animal to animal, plant to plant. It's all there. It's all there. So it starts here. Sexuality starts here. It's how you perceive yourself and the other. If you see in the other, the male, the female, then someone who has this more dominant component to their complex makeup, they don't feel so boxed in. They don't feel so boxed in. There's, in my wife, there's the male, and you relate to that male component, and vice versa. And I've helped people this way. Oh, that's an eye-opener. So it's not. So yeah, being honest with yourself, this person is feeling this. Okay, so channel it here, because it's there too. Channel it. Doesn't always work. If it's very, very strong, and that's it. The person's just, that's it. This is the person's mission on the world. They've got to be celibate. And if they're not, and they sin, you and I don't sit in judgment. That's between them and God. Only God judges. It's not a difficult subject, especially if you know people struggle with this. And they want to do the right thing, so we all have tremendous struggles. But at the end of the day, in terms of behavior, we can choose to behave, act upon it or not. The great principle of Tanya is that applies to all areas of life. The Torah is not commanding feel godly, feel holy. That's only for the tzaddik, and that's one in a generation or a handful or whatever the number is. The commandment is behave holy. Oh, it's a very different thing. Because that's where we all have control. We can act or not act. I want to kill you. I want to kill you. I really sincerely want to kill this person. I'm so angry at them. And you can't change that necessarily. You could, but that's very difficult. What you can do is, I'm not gonna. God says you can't. So this is not the only area in life where there's this frustration. At the end of the day, it's not frustrating either, because if I believe deeply I'm doing the right thing, it's liberating. I want to, but I don't. That's actually a deep liberation. It's deeper than the frustration, is knowing that I'm connected to God and doing the right thing. So a big part of all of this is here, it's knowledge, it's knowing, it's understanding ourselves, how we're built, and how we operate. How on earth did we get into this? I don't remember. Huh? How did we get into this?
Went from Tversky back to Tversky.
Before Tversky.
Right. Well, it's-
Conversion. No. Help me, somebody.
It is spirituality. What does it mean? Because really, you're both.
But how we get into the male-female thing here? Conversion.
You were talking about daily prayers, about not being a Gentile and not being
Shkoyach day.
a woman.
So yeah, that's right. So we addressed that question. Now we'll close brackets. We'll go back to our subject. So our question, I don't have an answer right now for you. Why we say Shalei Sani Isha, when it's a fact, you're born male, that happens the moment you're born, and it's not thank you anymore, it's once. But when it comes to, back to our subject, Shalei Sani Goy, that's because every day there's an element that all of us undergo kind of conversion. It's big news. Every single day. That's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to see and learn now. And that's a constant. Okay, so what's the explanation? So we started to explain last week, probably even 2 weeks ago, like this. That becoming Jewish, we have to go back to the original becoming Jewish. The whole template is what happened to our forefathers when they left Egypt and Matan Torah. Number one, Hashem, there's two things God tells the Jews, convey by Moishe Rabbeinu. Number one, I am bringing you to me, and you should be a treasure amongst all the nations of the world. A unique and distinct status. I am bringing you. Emphasis here is, I'm bringing you. That's number one. Second thing is, and you shall be a kingdom of priests, mamlechas kohanim v'goy kodesh. Kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That's kind of up to you. To put that in simple language, there's being Jewish and there's feeling Jewish. Not the same. Being Jewish, I take care of. You do this and this, as per my instructions, you're Jewish. Sincere, well, mil and tefillah. That's what it is. That's the physical component. Then this feeling Jewish That's already the mind and the heart and inspired and so on. So that's a difference. We start to learn between Milah and Tefillah on the one hand and Korban on the other hand. Specifically, Milah circumcision. What's Milah? Milah is removing a barrier. So Milah is leaving that world. The convert is leaving the unholy world. Step one, that's the first step. Step two, dank. Enter into the world of holiness. Tefillah, case of the female, she doesn't have to have a ritual to leave that world. When she enters the mikveh, she's leaving that world. That just shows, by the way, the superiority of the female doesn't need the rituals that the guy needs. Close brackets, just to connect to our previous discussion of male-female. The female is higher. But let's get to our point, back to our point here. So Milah and Tefillah, leave there, enter here. You do that, God says, godly soul. Finished. Finished. Korban. What korban means kiruv. Kiruv means feel close. As we explained last week, what is the korban all about? The korban is bringing the blood on the altar, the fat. Blood is passion. Blood represents passion. Fat represents pleasure, indulgence. So all of these human experiences, you're offering them to Hashem. You're offering your animal soul. That's the animal. So that's already an internal offering of the feelings of the heart. That's feeling Jewish. Kiruv, feeling closer, closer, closer. That's something distinct and separate from being Jewish. As we said moments ago, the big teaching of Tanya, the Beinoni, the aspiring Beinoni, which is the goal of all of us, is not to feel God necessarily, but to act godly. Not feel godly, but act godly. And that's a choice we can all have. Now, once you're Jewish, you got to act godly. Here are the commandments that a Jew has to behave. Non-Jews got to act godly in their ways. But being Jewish, God confers. You go through this process, me. Korban, that's already you to do, and that's a very individual thing, and that's feeling. So therefore the Rebbe says, nowadays when God is concealed, feel Jewish is very hard. God isn't revealed, there's no Beis Hamikdash. So we have nowadays is the essential being Jewish. That's eternal and perfect. And that's why the conversion is 100%, because you are Jewish. In the exile period, if you so desire and you can't even explain it, you go through the Milah and Tefillah, done. There's no korban today because to feel the presence of God and be in the holy temple and off from the altar, there just isn't. God's not revealed. Mind you, in parenthesis right now, getting close to Mashiach's coming, we're starting to feel a little bit. But incomparable to friends, incomparable, as we will see once Mashiach comes. It's a whole. And yet I just want to tell you something. Even there are times we feel inspired. There are times we feel inspired. Let me tell you the nature of our inspiration. How fragile it is. And I mentioned this before, that Yom Kippur, I said, when do we read? Aside from reading it in Parshas Achrei, when we get to it in the yearly cycle, but when do we read this prohibition of prohibited sexual behavior, from incense to bestiality, Yom Kippur at Mincha. Yom Kippur at Mincha. So I remember the famous Fabrengen, Yud Aleph Nissen, the Rebbe was talking about this because we always read it around Yud Aleph Nissen time, Parshas Achrei, Moishe. The Rebbe was crying. The Rebbe said, Gewalt. He said, what's going on here? It's Yom Kippur. A Jew has been fasting. He's standing in his kittel. He's standing surrounded by a multitude of Jews. He's preparing for Ne'ilah, the culmination of Shema Yisrael. And what do we read? K'maisa eretz Mitzrayim, k'maisa eretz Canaan lisasim. You shouldn't do the abominations that they did in Egypt and in Canaan. It was crying, Gewalt. That's what you read now? And the Rebbe said, because the Jew has to know that you're inspired at Yom Kippur. You could do this now. Doesn't take much. Doesn't take much to get derailed. because that inspiration is, so Mashiach comes, the kiruv, the offering of the inside, the inner organs to God, we're not capable of it. That's what the korban does. It's the offering of the innards on the altar. Mashiach will come, will have that kind of real inspiration. But now it's just, I am Jewish and I behave Jewish. That's what it is. The korban, the insides, kiruv, the kravayim, that's the word. Kravayim are the inners of the korban, the same word that is offered on the altar to some degree, but not to the degree that we can really and sustainably and to begin with deeply as we can experience that when God's revealed and the temple, Beis Hamikdash stands. That's why there's no korban now. There's no korban now because feeling, wait for that. Being and acting Jewish 100%. In other words, Beinani. Tzaddik, when Mashiach comes, will be tzaddikim. But what can we be now? Beinani. So we'll stop here. Now next week, what's next week? Yeah, next week I'm going to Australia, God willing, but in the morning we'll have the shir. I'm going a bit later in the afternoon. So next week, we're in a hurry. We're not going anywhere. Let me just finish. We're not going anywhere. We're not in a hurry. So we'll finish it next week to explain why we say Shalom Yasani Goy every day. We haven't gotten to that yet. We're beginning our explanation. What we explained now is why there's no korban nowadays. Why, even though there were 3 factors that our ancestors entered into the covenant, in the time of exile, it's only 2. Because they enter, they're about becoming Jewish, and the 3rd is about the experience of being Jewish, the feeling Jewish. Okay, that's what we're up to. Yes?
Just
Question,
curious
Elsa.
about Shalom Sani Guy. So somebody who is a convert,
Yeah, we're going to explain it next
how does
week.
that fall in there? Like, yes, they were born with a neshama that was hidden because they were actually born to non-Jewish parents. So, but I mean, their essence is Jewish, but still. Yeah,
We're going
to next
we're
week.
going to explain it next week. Yeah. It's all next week. We didn't get to it yet. Yeah, that'll be explained next week too. Okay, my dear friends, have a wonderful day. Thank you all for joining.